The maternity ward smelled of antiseptic and new beginnings, a strange mixture of cold cleanliness and fragile hope. Outside the delivery rooms, nurses moved quietly, their shoes whispering against the polished floor, while families sat clutching flowers, balloons, and nervous prayers. In one corner of the ward, however, the air was thick with tension. A young woman lay pale and exhausted on her hospital bed, her newborn sleeping beside her, unaware of the storm gathering just beyond his tiny breaths. She had barely recovered from childbirth when her mother-in-law arrived, her footsteps sharp, her eyes burning with a sense of authority that did not belong to her. The older woman did not come with congratulations or tears of joy. She came with accusations, bitterness, and a rigid belief that she alone knew what was right. Her words were cutting, delivered in a low but poisonous voice as she told the young mother that she did not belong there, that she had brought shame, that she should leave the hospital and not dare to return to the family home. Nurses paused, sensing something was wrong, but the mother-in-law waved them off, insisting it was a family matter. The young woman tried to speak, but exhaustion and shock pinned her voice to her chest. She clutched her baby closer, her eyes filling with tears, feeling small and disposable at the very moment she should have felt powerful. Just as the situation seemed unbearable, the unexpected happened. The door opened, and a man stepped into the room, his presence instantly shifting the balance of power. He was calm, but there was steel beneath his composure. This was not someone who could be intimidated or dismissed. The mother-in-law froze mid-sentence, her mouth slightly open, words evaporating before they could land. The man listened quietly as the nurse explained what was happening, then turned to the older woman with a steady gaze. He did not shout. He did not insult. He simply spoke the truth, clearly and without hesitation, reminding her where she was, what her daughter-in-law had just endured, and what kind of behavior was unacceptable. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that follows when reality finally catches up with cruelty. That same kind of raw, disarming honesty was what later unfolded on a very different stage, under bright studio lights rather than hospital fluorescence. When Jim Carrey appeared on The View, audiences expected humor, eccentric charm, and perhaps a few playful jabs. What they did not expect was an interview that would peel back layers of performance and expose something far more uncomfortable and real. The conversation began lightly, as it always does, with laughter and surface-level questions. Jim smiled, joked, and played along, but there was an undercurrent in his voice that hinted at something deeper waiting to emerge. As the discussion turned toward authenticity, fame, and the pressures of the entertainment industry, the tone shifted. Joy Behar challenged Jim's views, questioning whether authenticity could truly exist in a world built on performance. Jim didn't dodge the question. Instead, he leaned in, his expression sharpening, and responded with an intensity that caught everyone off guard. He spoke about masks, about how celebrities are expected to become products, and about how truth is often sacrificed for comfort and ratings. His words were not rehearsed. They were messy, emotional, and undeniably sincere. Joy pushed back, unwilling to let the moment pass without scrutiny. The exchange grew heated, voices overlapping, tension crackling through the studio. This was no longer a polished segment designed to entertain between commercial breaks. It felt like watching two people wrestle with ideas that cut to the core of modern media. Jim questioned the role of talk shows in shaping narratives, suggesting that even platforms meant for discussion often prefer spectacle over substance. Joy defended the responsibility of journalists and hosts, arguing that conversation itself is a form of truth-seeking, even when imperfect. Around them, the rest of the panel sat stunned. Smiles faded. Cue cards were forgotten. The audience leaned forward, sensing that something rare was happening. Jim spoke about the exhaustion of pretending, about how the world rewards those who play along and punishes those who step outside the script. He admitted his own contradictions, acknowledging that he, too, was part of the system he criticized. That vulnerability disarmed the room more than any joke ever could. What made the moment so powerful was not who won the argument, but the fact that neither side backed down from honesty. It mirrored the confrontation in the maternity ward, where truth had finally silenced cruelty. In both cases, power shifted not through aggression, but through clarity. Jim was not attacking Joy personally, just as the man in the hospital had not attacked the mother-in-law. They were confronting ideas, behaviors, and unspoken assumptions that had gone unchallenged for too long. By the time the segment ended, there was a strange stillness in the studio. Applause came hesitantly, as if the audience wasn't sure whether clapping was appropriate after something so exposing. Jim leaned back, exhaling, a flicker of relief crossing his face. Joy nodded, thoughtful rather than triumphant. It was clear that whatever disagreements remained, something real had been exchanged. In the maternity ward, the older woman eventually left without another word, her authority dissolved. The young mother watched her go, still trembling, but no longer alone. She looked down at her baby, feeling a quiet strength take root inside her. In the studio, viewers at home sat in stunned silence, replaying Jim's words in their minds, questioning their own roles as consumers of media and performance. Both moments, though worlds apart, shared the same lesson. When truth enters the room, carefully constructed roles collapse. Masks fall away. And in that uncomfortable, vulnerable space, something honest finally has the chance to breathe. The corridor outside the maternity ward was unusually quiet, as if the building itself sensed the fragile boundary between joy and despair that hovered there. A young woman lay propped against white pillows, her body aching, her mind still drifting between pain and relief after childbirth. Beside her, a tiny bundle slept peacefully, unaware of the world's sharp edges. This should have been a moment of warmth and protection, but instead, it was invaded by hostility wearing the face of family. Her mother-in-law stood near the bed, arms crossed, eyes hard, radiating judgment rather than concern. Her voice was sharp and deliberate as she spoke, each word landing like a slap. She accused the young woman of disrespect, of failure, of bringing embarrassment. She claimed the child was a mistake, that the marriage itself had been a mistake, and that the hospital bed she lay in was not a place she deserved. Nurses hovered nearby, uncomfortable but hesitant, sensing that something deeply personal was unfolding. The young mother tried to answer, but her throat tightened. She had no strength left to defend herself. Tears slid silently down her temples as she held her baby closer, instinctively shielding him from the hostility in the room. Then the door opened. A figure stepped inside, not rushing, not shouting, simply present in a way that demanded attention. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The mother-in-law's voice faltered, her certainty cracking as she recognized the newcomer. He listened calmly, allowing the silence to stretch, giving space for the weight of the situation to settle. When he finally spoke, his words were measured and firm. He reminded her that this room was a place of healing, not cruelty, and that the woman in the bed had just done something extraordinary. There was no room for threats or control here. The older woman stood frozen, stripped of the power she had assumed was hers, before turning and leaving without another word. That silence, heavy and revealing, echoed the kind of moment that later unfolded under television lights, where silence can be far more unsettling than noise. When Jim Carrey walked onto the set of The View, the audience expected entertainment. They expected laughter, odd expressions, perhaps a quirky monologue. What they got instead was something far less comfortable and far more memorable. The interview began predictably enough, with smiles, applause, and light banter. Jim played along, his familiar energy filling the room, but there was an edge beneath it, a sense that he was holding back something unsaid. As the conversation drifted toward fame and the meaning of authenticity, the shift was subtle but unmistakable. Jim's tone changed. He spoke about the pressure to perform even when the cameras are off, about the expectations placed on public figures to remain characters rather than people. Joy Behar challenged him, questioning whether complete authenticity was even possible in an industry built on illusion. The exchange sharpened quickly. What had been a friendly debate turned into a confrontation that felt almost intrusive in its honesty. Jim leaned forward, his words spilling out with urgency. He talked about truth as something uncomfortable, something people claim to want but rarely accept when it disrupts their routines. He criticized the media's tendency to package emotion into digestible segments, arguing that real human experience doesn't fit neatly between commercial breaks. Joy pushed back just as firmly, defending the role of conversation, of questioning, of engaging audiences where they are rather than where they ideally should be. Their voices overlapped at times, the tension thick enough to make the studio audience shift in their seats. What made the moment so arresting was the absence of performance. Jim wasn't delivering lines. Joy wasn't moderating for comfort. Both were speaking from deeply held convictions, and neither seemed concerned about how it would look afterward. The rest of the panel watched in near silence, unsure whether to intervene or simply bear witness. This was no longer a segment, it was a collision of perspectives that exposed the fragile line between entertainment and truth. Jim admitted his own complicity, acknowledging that he had benefited from the very system he was criticizing. That confession softened the confrontation without diminishing its intensity. It transformed the argument from an attack into a reckoning. Joy listened, her expression shifting from defensive to contemplative, as if recognizing that the conversation had moved beyond winning or losing. The audience, both in the studio and at home, sensed it too. This was one of those rare moments when television stops being safe. As the discussion wound down, there was no neat resolution. No one declared victory. Instead, there was a pause, an uneasy quiet that lingered longer than applause usually does. Jim leaned back, visibly drained, as if he had finally said something he had been carrying for a long time. Joy nodded slowly, her posture relaxed but thoughtful. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the aftermath rather than rushing to smooth it over. Back in the maternity ward, the young mother rested her head against the pillow, the tension slowly draining from her body. The room felt different now, lighter, safer. She looked at her child and felt something shift inside her, a realization that she was not as powerless as she had believed. Someone had spoken up. Someone had interrupted cruelty with truth. That knowledge settled into her like a quiet promise. Both scenes, though separated by context and circumstance, revealed the same uncomfortable reality. Whether in a hospital room or a television studio, truth has a way of disrupting carefully maintained roles. It silences those who rely on control and exposes the fragility of masks we wear for approval. These moments are rarely comfortable, but they are necessary. They remind us that honesty, when it finally breaks through, doesn't just change conversations, it changes the balance of power itself.